There's a particular kind of concept car that exists purely to generate press coverage and then quietly disappears. And there's another kind that tells you something real about where a manufacturer is heading. Renault has generally been better than most at the second type, and the Bridger concept fits that pattern. It's a compact off-road SUV built specifically for emerging markets, India first, then broader across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And it's being positioned directly against the Suzuki Jimny, which is about as clear a statement of intent as a manufacturer can make without actually putting a vehicle on sale. The Jimny is worth dwelling on for a moment, because understanding why it matters helps explain why the Bridger exists. Suzuki built something that most other manufacturers decided wasn't worth bothering with, a small, genuinely capable off-roader that doesn't dress itself up as something it isn't. While the rest of the industry spent the past 2 decades producing crossovers that sit higher than a hatchback but handle rougher terrain only marginally better, Suzuki kept making a vehicle with real low-range gearing, proper ground clearance, and a body-on-frame construction that actually means something when the road runs out. The result is a car with a waiting list in multiple countries and a second-hand market that defies depreciation logic. Renault has clearly been paying attention, and the Bridger is their answer to the question of what happens when a larger manufacturer takes that formula seriously with contemporary resources behind it. Visually, the concept makes a strong argument immediately. The proportions are squared off and upright in a way that calls back to the original Land Rover Defender, without directly copying it. Short overhangs, prominent wheel arches, a high stance, and a rear-mounted spare wheel that signals practical intent rather than retro styling. These are not decorative choices. The Defender's original proportions weren't the result of a design team trying to create an icon. They were the result of engineers working out the most functional shape for a vehicle that needed to do specific things in specific conditions, and the aesthetics followed from that logic. The Bridger appears to be working from a similar starting point, where the exterior communicates function first and style second. In a segment populated largely by vehicles that are essentially raised hatchbacks with plastic trim additions and a marketing budget spent on outdoor photography, that kind of honesty stands out. The thick body cladding around the lower panels looks genuinely protective rather than cosmetic. The glass areas are upright enough to suggest decent outward visibility, which matters when you're trying to place a vehicle on a narrow track or judge distances in traffic that doesn't follow predictable patterns. Every surface seems to be doing something rather than just existing to fill space between the panels that actually matter. Whether that holds true in the production version, where cost pressures and manufacturing realities tend to soften concept stage intentions, is the question that 2027 will answer. But the concept itself presents a coherent and believable vision. Renault has confirmed the Bridger will stay under 4 meters in overall length, which serves more than one purpose simultaneously. The most immediately practical is the Indian tax structure, which treats sub-4 meter vehicles more favorably and makes a meaningful difference to the final price that consumers see. But the size constraint also shapes the vehicle's personality in ways that go beyond regulatory compliance. A genuinely compact SUV that can thread through the dense, chaotic traffic of a major Asian or African city while still offering meaningful capability off-road is a different proposition from a large SUV that handles rough terrain but becomes an ordeal to park. The Jimny's urban usability has always been part of its appeal in crowded markets, and the Bridger is clearly designed with those same daily realities in mind. What Renault has been careful to emphasize is that staying compact doesn't mean accepting cramped. The rear seating is expected to provide up to 200 millimeters of knee room, which is a specific and meaningful claim for a vehicle in this size bracket. Getting that figure in a sub-4 meter package requires genuine discipline in how the wheelbase is proportioned and how the cabin is packaged. You can't achieve it accidentally or by simply stretching the exterior dimensions until the numbers work. The cargo capacity is projected at around 400 liters, which is the detail that tends to stop people mid-sentence when they first hear it, because 400 liters in a vehicle under 4 meters long exceeds what a Volkswagen Golf offers in its boot. The Golf is essentially the reference point for practical compact cars in the European context, so surpassing it in cargo terms while being shorter overall and sitting higher off the ground is a genuinely impressive packaging achievement if the production version delivers it. The off-road credentials visible in the concept are suggestive without being fully confirmed. Ground clearance looks substantial. The wheel arches have the dimensions to accommodate meaningful suspension travel. The body cladding is positioned where it would actually need to be to protect against rocks and undergrowth, rather than just around the edges where it looks good in photographs. Whether the final vehicle includes a proper low-range transfer case, optimized approach and departure angles, and a suspension system tuned for rough terrain rather than smooth road compliance remains to be seen. These are the details that determine whether a vehicle is genuinely capable off-road or simply styled to suggest it might be, and Renault hasn't provided them yet. The design language points in the right direction, but the hardware choices will decide how the Bridger performs against the Jimny when someone actually takes both of them somewhere difficult. The platform underneath is the Renault Group Modular Platform Small, RGMP Small internally, which has been engineered to handle multiple powertrain types from the outset. That flexibility is commercially important for a vehicle targeting markets as diverse as the Bridger's intended territory. India, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Middle East don't just have different buyer preferences, they have different fuel availability, different emissions regulations, different government incentive structures, and different charging infrastructure realities. A modular architecture that can carry a small turbocharged petrol engine, a hybrid system, or a fully electric drivetrain without requiring a separate vehicle development program for each market gives Renault the ability to optimize the offer regionally rather than forcing a single solution everywhere. Specific powertrain specifications haven't been released, but the Dacia Duster lineup offers a reasonable template for what might appear. The Duster starts with a turbocharged 1.0-liter three-cylinder producing around 99 horsepower with a 6-speed manual, a pragmatic entry point for markets where first cost and mechanical simplicity matter most. The step up is a 1.3-liter turbocharged four-cylinder at approximately 158 horsepower, typically paired with a dual-clutch automatic. Above that sits a hybrid variant combining a 1.8-liter petrol engine with electric assistance for similar output with improved efficiency. Some version of that range, adapted to the Bridger's smaller footprint and specific market requirements, seems like the most plausible production outcome. A fully electric version is possible in markets with the infrastructure to support it, but in significant parts of Africa and the Middle East, charging networks are still developing, and a vehicle targeting those regions can't depend on infrastructure that isn't reliably there yet. Development is centered in Chennai, and that decision is more meaningful than it might initially appear. Renault's Indian engineering operation has accumulated real expertise in building vehicles that work in conditions where European-developed cars often struggle: extreme heat, unpredictable road surfaces, dust, heavy loads, and the specific demands of markets where buyers scrutinize value propositions with considerably more care than in premium segments. Developing the Bridger in that environment means it gets stress-tested against the actual conditions it will face rather than simulated versions of them. Indian buyers in the sub-4-meter SUV segment are not forgiving of compromises, and the category is intensely competitive with established local and international players. Building a vehicle that can earn their approval is a more rigorous test than satisfying buyers in markets with more predictable conditions. The broader strategic logic behind the Bridger becomes clearer when you look at what's happened to the small, capable off-roader as a category over the past 2 decades. Most major manufacturers walked away from it as consumer preferences in Western markets shifted toward larger, more comfort-oriented SUVs with premium positioning. The segment didn't disappear. The Jimny's continued success and persistent demand across multiple markets proves that clearly enough. It just stopped receiving serious investment from most manufacturers. Suzuki's deliberate approach to production volume kept the Jimny scarce in some markets and pushed prices upward, creating a gap between what buyers want and what they can reasonably access. That gap is an opportunity, and Renault is moving to fill it with a vehicle that brings contemporary engineering resources and a global distribution network to a formula that still clearly resonates. The launch is planned in 2027 in India, with expansion across target regions in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East to follow. Europe and North America aren't in the current plan, which will generate the predictable frustration among enthusiasts in those markets who would happily buy something like the Bridger if it were available to them. But the vehicle isn't designed for those buyers, and that's precisely what makes it interesting. It's built around the genuine mobility needs of fast-growing economies rather than the lifestyle aspirations of markets that are already saturated with options. If the production version maintains the clarity of purpose and delivers on the practical claims around interior space and real-world capability, the Bridger has a strong chance of becoming something more than a well-received concept. It could be a vehicle that actually matters to the people it was designed for, which is ultimately the only measure of success that counts.